Thank you, everybody, for coming in and listening to this panel. I'm really excited about this. We would be hard-pressed to get a duo like these two who can speak to this subject better. Okay, a really brief introduction, because we only have 35 minutes here. Andrew Pitcairn is a member of the Pitcairn family, as well as part of its, since this is a governance panel, we will spin through it quickly. Its board of directors, the chair of its governance committee, a member of the Trust and Risk Committee, but you also run a peer group for other family offices, right? And you also serve, I believe, you're a member of a board or also an advisor for another single-family office, right? We'll get a little bit more into that. And Brian, you've helped first generation all the way through fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh generation families. Yeah. Establish, Andrew, you've helped run those offices. But a couple years ago, you joined Fidelity to run its Forge community, where, among other things, you help them. You basically help offices connect with one another and curate events, partly to address exactly some of the things we're going to be talking about. Okay, that's as much talking as I'm going to do. I think the best place to start is that regardless of a family's wealth, the best time to be thinking about governance and conflict resolution, like many things, is before you need those things. So, do you guys want to start by stressing that and as best as you can answering what is the right time to start thinking about that, engaging with a client or family about that?
I'll jump in there. First of all, thanks everybody for coming. It's good to see everyone here today. It's a beautiful venue. We're certainly appreciative of the opportunity to see everyone and share a few minutes. Thanks for the introduction. Barry, that was great. Barry's kind of a big deal. It's really fun to meet him. I'd never met him before, so very grateful to be up here. I think you're right. We at the Forge community is a collection of single-family office executives from around the country and around the world, and so we have the opportunity to talk to them and listen to them and try to help them. And one of the things that we hear is what works and what doesn't work. And one of the things that has consistently been evident that doesn't work is to not have a plan and never talk about it. So regardless of the size or the age, whether it's Gen 1 or Gen 7 or Gen 8, these issues don't resolve themselves through just not addressing or talking about them. So that is the one strategy that we often hear. It causes the most pain points, is just never talking about it. So I think you're right. And it can look different with every family office, and it can display itself differently. There's not a one-size-fits-all answer. It sort of depends a lot on the uniqueness of each family, but never talking about it never works, rarely works. I've never seen it work. How about that? It might somewhere, but it doesn't. It's just not something you see, whether it's based on size or number of generations or where you're based. It's always an issue to struggle. Andrew, what do you think?
Yeah, happy to jump in there. Can everyone hear us okay, by the way? I have never been accused of needing a microphone, but here we go. So, I want to stress this by saying we're a Gen 7 family. I'm Gen 4. And maybe a little more important than generations, or at least as important, is head count. So we, at last count, have just about 1,000 people in our family. So I've lived through a couple different liquidity events. That's a PC way of saying a couple different family splits. And I want to kind of stress what you're saying. I think the best time to start talking about what the family needs from a governance standpoint is before you need something. We found ourselves sideways at about Gen 4 with some of the way the family was thinking about what does our family office want to do? How should our family office be run? What should investments look like? What should the full service offering look like? And there was a part of the family that thought the office should be more slimmed down and more efficient and let people go do their own thing. And there was another side of the family that thought, let's be a full-service boutique family office and really open up our doors to work with other families. It was just two different ways of people thinking about things. And that's really what caused our first kind of family split, if you will. It was, and I think to your very good point, I wish looking back, and this is when I was young, by the way. I was probably just around in high school. So I wasn't involved with the family business back then. But if I was, I would like to think I would have looked back and said, we should have started something earlier that was more formal and giving people a voice. And everyone says we communicate well. You probably heard this in business, in relationships, in marriages, right? We communicate really, really well. Most people's version of communicating is talking. And I can assure you that God gave us two ears and one mouth for a reason. If you listen more and talk less, you can really hear what people are thinking and feeling and plan for it.
And maybe this is a little bit more for you, Brian, but for what are predominantly advisors in the audience, like, anything else you can say about like the right time to start broaching this with any client, any family that has been a client of you, an advisor of some kind for 1 day, 1 year, 10 years? So what is the right? Is it the first day that you start engaging with this person? Like what is there a right answer, a more finite one to the when do you start at least getting the family to think about this kind of stuff?
Right. There's a saying that is often bantered about in family office land that some friends and I often take issue with, which is, if you've seen one family office, you've seen one family office. That's true in some regards, but there are things in every family office that you have to wrestle with, right? Whether it can look different, but every family, well, I've never met one that hasn't had to deal with some sort of reporting issue or decision making, or whether it's human capital management or financial capital management. They have these issues they have to wrestle with. So it certainly depends based on the unique nature of the family, but a term we often hear used amongst families is ages and stages. Like, what are the ages, what are the stages, and what is the structure of the family office? Now, I think listening, like you were saying, 2 ears, 1 mouth is on purpose, and listening is one of the most valuable skills families try to educate each other on. And we often see the education and the communication isn't just one way. The struggle is that the communication needs to be two ways. So it's from a leading generation to a next gen, and also from the next gen to a leading gen, right? It's both ways. And where we often see some of the issues are having the leading gen listen to the next gen. So understanding what the communication is like, if it's effective, how they accomplish that, and the structure. What is the current governance structure? How? And we were talking about this earlier. When we say governance, what I think of is how are decisions being made, right? And is it a monarchy? Are there councils? Does every generation get a vote? Does every tribe get a vote or a say? Are the voices, are they advisory only, or is there actual authority assigned to some of those participations? So for folks working with families, it's I think listening is really helpful, and understanding the unique context of how decisions are made. What is the structure like? And I think it's the seen and the unseen. And maybe that'd be something interesting to hear about. What are the known structures in communication styles, and then what are the unknown or unseen, in navigating what's on paper versus what's reality? Sort of when you're in a meeting, when people ask for an opinion and then they look past to the matriarch or patriarch, like, yeah, okay, what do you really think? So those nuances of how communication happens are really important.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. One of the things that I would piggyback on what you were saying is, a lot of families, especially the hierarchy of the families, whether it's granddad or your father and mother, whoever the wealth creator, the Gen 1 we'll call it, there's a lot of fear around this, well, if we start asking questions, we have to have a deliverable. And I don't think that that's true. I think you can ask questions of people. What do you think about this? How do you feel about it? What do you want from it? What's important to you? And just listen to the answers. And you don't have to say, okay, you said you want more dividends, you said you want better investments, or you said you want, okay, thanks for telling me. We're going to take that into consideration as we think about strategic initiatives moving forward. It might be a year or 5 years or 10 years, but you don't have to have a deliverable that meets everybody's desire right then and there. And I think that's part of the challenge. People tend to think, well, I'm not going to ask because I can't deliver it. You can ask, just listen, and then maybe write yourself a list down and say, okay, I heard this, I heard that. I think it goes to your point of what are people really telling you versus what are they really thinking behind the scenes. And a lot of times if you do it in front of your parents, you're going to get a different answer than if you do it behind the closed doors. And I never forget, one of my psych professors had a definition for what he defined an adult as. And this always stuck with me. And he said, my definition of an adulthood, is being able to make decisions that are different than your parents would have made and feel good about it. And I thought that was really, really interesting.
Okay, so You know what they say about the best laid plans. Uh, it, it, Andrew, do you want to talk a little bit about a little bit of the evolution of your family? I know that you guys, this was like 30 years ago now, you guys created like the family council. Can you even just sort of generally describe like what was the impetus for that, what exactly that is? And I just feel like that's a good example of, and I think you were sort of alluding this earlier, the people are realizing that the governance or structure, something, there might be a difference of opinions, but that something else needs to be established or changed so that some decisions can be made and there can be progress for the office or the family.
Yeah, I'm happy to dive in. I'll try to thread the needle relatively quickly here because it's a pretty long history. So great-granddad was a Scottish immigrant, came over, worked railroad, oil and gas, and then in 1883 founded a company called Pittsburgh Plate Glass, PPG Industries. Still in existence today. It's a Fortune 500 company, very big company. That was our founding company. So 1883, great-granddad founded Pittsburgh Plate Glass. 1923, his three sons, one of which was my grandfather, founded our family office. So we just celebrated 102 years as a family office, one of the oldest family offices that I know of, at least. There's a couple that are older, but very old family office. Our family loves to procreate. I'll put it, it's just that simple. So Gen 7, 1,000 people in the family. We have a saying in the family, the Pitcairn family might be wealthy, but we have not been idle. We know how to procreate. And so by the time we reached about 1980 or so, the family had grown to 350 people. Gen 4 was in control of my generation. Generations spanned about 45 years. So I'm the younger side of G4. Older side of G4 is about 90. And the family had come, like I was alluding to before, different philosophies on how our family office was run, different liquidity needs, even though we were running Pittsburgh Plate Glass still. And there was a split in the family in 1985 that was precipitated by one of our family members being fired as CEO of the family office. So our family office was a huge family office by any means. So from 1923 to 1986, we ran a 90-person SFO. So today, SFOs are usually between 1 and 5 people, maybe 7 people. But we were running a 90-person single-family office. And there was only 4 of us that were ever family in the office. It was by design that way. So most were outside professionals. But that firing of the family member back in, I would say, call it 1980, precipitated that branch of the family saying, we're out of here. We don't understand what happened here. We want out of family structures. So we decided to sell Pittsburgh Plate Glass. That was our big liquidity event. 1986, we sold PPG. We found ourselves in the unusual position of not having an operating company as an entrepreneurial family. So we opened up our doors from a single family office to a trust company multifamily office in 1987. So that is the operating company the family owns today, part of the family owns today. More to your point, what I wish we had done a little better, a little earlier was, in 1980, we established a family council. For those that aren't familiar with the family council, it's really a representative board that doesn't have any voting power, that really represents the shareholder and ownership group of our business. It can represent the broader family. In our case, it represented the ownership group. And what it did was it allowed people to become more educated about an owner, about what the company is doing, what are the opportunities of being in the family office, how do you become a better informed owner of the family office. And I think one of the things, if I look back on this, is that we did poorly, I would say. When we established our family council, we called it a family council, but it really wasn't. It didn't include the whole family. So if you had chosen, like I was saying before, that one part of the branch of the family that left, if you had chosen to leave the family office, you were not included in anything the family council did. And so, unfortunately, we defined family by those who stayed and those who left. I think that was a huge mistake. What we should have done was we should have had a family council that included the whole family, regardless of your affiliation with the operating businesses. And we should have had an ownership council that allowed the owners of the operating businesses to come together as shareholders and discuss the future of the business. The family council is now an owners council, has been a huge success over the generations, but I wish we had done it much, much earlier. I wish we had established something before we had an event that was sizable that caused disruption in the family.
So the owners council and the family council have now, are they merged?
Bifurcated. bifurcated. So
Is the branches that were not a part of it, are they back? Do they have a voice or seat at the table?
So there's part of the outside people who had left the family office that are working on a more formal family council. We've done family gatherings where everybody is invited.
Everybody.
Everybody is invited. We are now actually relaunching our owners council where it is just for the ownership group that owns the family office.
Yeah, that's
so it's been quite an undertaking.
That's complicated.
I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you, Brian. This is one example of a challenge an office and a family is facing. But like, how sort of common is a problem, even like sort of akin to that, or are there some other things that you, having engaged with so many different families, something? Is there anything else that's
right.
top of mind?
No, that's good. I think Andrew's experience is not atypical. We see a lot at Forge. We talk to lots of families. A member of Forge was sharing with me, they were at a event overseas, and they were with some European families that went back 25 generations. And they were talking about, he was sharing with me his conversation of how these, and he was asking about the issues and how they have resolved some of these generational conflicts and having voices and seats at the table. And this gentleman was like, oh no, we still have these issues. And he's like, wait, after 25 generations, oh yeah, we still have them. Because it's almost the human condition. So it's not something that you can necessarily solve, set it and forget it. That these things, part of the governance conversation is having flexibility. We often hear families talk about flexibility is really, really important because things can change. And you want to continue to create opportunities for multiple voices. That's why I was asking our folks coming back. A couple of thoughts, just thinking about what Andrew had to say. Understanding and talking about what conflict resolution can look like is really important because it is inevitable. It doesn't have to be permanent. It doesn't have to be unresolvable, but there should be, as good practice, just talking about what conflict resolution looks like, whether it's a process, whether it's a formal process or an informal process, but working toward resolution is really important. Otherwise, when things happen, families tend to find out, well, what do we do now? Like, we don't know. So talking about it before it happens is an important part of it. And there's no one way to do that, right? I've never heard one way works and other way. It all depended on the family. So having a process up front is really important. The other sort of tool that I've seen different families use from time to time is a process where you make decisions over time. And what I mean by that is I've heard of a couple of families doing this where they say, we will have a meeting that simply defines the problem, the issue at hand. Sometimes we will even discuss it, but we will not define it, discuss it, and decide it in the same meeting. We will allow there to be some time in between. So you define it, and maybe you come back and discuss it, and then maybe decide it. But creating some time so that people have an opportunity to share and to talk and to think and do some sort of informal discussions about that. So having a process on how material decisions are made is really important. I think that I have heard families have a lot of success with that versus very ad hoc. We're going to introduce an idea. We're all going to debate it right now and decide. That can be tricky because things weigh differently. And allowing families to have time to think about how that weighs is really important. So I don't know if that resonates or...
No, I think you make some really good points there, and I agree with you. I'll piggyback on that again and say, one of the things to what you just said about having a process for defining these things is really important. I think as well, giving people the autonomy to make decisions that are in their best interest is the same thing. I think it's one and the same. And I'll give you an example. I remember one of our family leaders who was a very successful family leader, but he was kind of a top-down guy, and he basically said to his side of his branch of the family, his kids and his grandkids, which was extreme, right? So you've heard about how big our family is. So under this one gentleman and his wife, he had 75 or so kids and grandkids. But I remember being told by one of his grandkids, that he basically told the family, while I'm alive, none of you will leave this family office. It basically just said, you're not leaving while I'm alive. Well, what happens when you tell a kid he can't have a toy, or can't have that piece of candy, or fill in the blank, right? Everybody wants what they can't have. And it set up a domino effect of when he passed away, maybe 10 years ago now, guess what happened? Every one of his kids left the family office. And it was not about the offering of the family office. It wasn't about a problem with the family office. It was about an emotion. Emotionally, they were tied to something and held hostage in a place where they couldn't act as adults, right? And it was several of them are my very good friends. It was extremely painful to watch them live through that. And then I saw lots of tears saying, we have to leave the family office because I have to find myself. And I never forget that when they told me that. So I think that people undervalue the emotional aspect of families. And so much effort goes into investment performance and estate planning and making sure that your taxes are done. But people do not, in our family it was the same way. People by and large are not putting lots of effort and resources behind how does our family communicate? How do we get along? How do you raise responsible stewards of wealth? How do you encourage entrepreneurism? What does being responsible philanthropically mean? It's just the EQ versus the IQ side of the conversation, and it's harder to quantify, right? You can quantify your investment deliverable, but write a check for family education, it's really difficult to see that short range.
I want to ask a question. Y'all have walked a very interesting path, and one of the challenges that you guys have navigated is the expansion of the headcount. Like, oftentimes you see when you talk to families, it is, particularly if the wealth creator is still alive, it's this, the structure resembles a monarchy, right? He who created the wealth makes the rules. And as it grows, certainly over time, often the headcount grows, and how you navigate inclusion and who gets to inform a decision versus who gets to make a decision, right? Where there's input versus where there's a vote versus where there's, so how have you guys, you've done it incredibly well. Well, I'll let you comment on that, but you've done it. And that's something the families think a lot about is, well, as the seats at the table get more and more, how do we navigate decision making? Like, how have y'all done that?
It's a really good question, and I appreciate your sentiment that we did it well. Maybe we did. Maybe we could have done it really better in hindsight. I think hindsight's always 20/20. I have a sticky note on my desk that somebody said to me literally 10 years ago, and it says, "The bigger my family gets, the smaller the mandate." And what that means, what he said to me was, I've realized that I can't hold people together like the bundle of sticks. Like, just because I want something, or my forefathers wanted something, or my mother wanted something, doesn't make it right as the generations go down. So trying to find what that means tomorrow. The 7 deadliest words in business, we have always done things this way. Surely a recipe for disaster. And I think one of the things that we did well, especially after the first family split, so you heard me say we had a family split in '86, sold Pittsburgh Plate Glass, let that portion of the family branch leave. We unwound our holding company. We did a lot of events to try to give that branch autonomy and let them get out of shared structures. I think the other thing that we did really well was we said, you know what, we're not just going to take all of the liquidity, put all of it in trust, and now you have a bunch of trustees that everybody has to report to. We did it with some of that money. So we established, don't ever do this, by the way, several thousand trusts. There was never a need to establish several thousand trusts, just so you know. We've whittled that down now to about 1,000 or so. I might be a little off there by 100 or 2, but who's counting when you're up to 1,000 trusts?
Modest number.
Yeah, so we did that really well, and what we also did was we pushed a lot of the money down to the household level. So we said to people, you know what, wherever you are, I was not part of this, but people got money in trust and they got money directly out in their personal portfolios to give them more autonomy in what they wanted to be, to how they wanted to allocate it, what they wanted to do with it. That was really well done. What we also did after that was we realized the family kept growing. So in '93, we had another liquidity event. You heard me say it's a PC way of saying it was a family split. It was just another portion of the family wanted out of the family office structures. They just wanted out of shared structures, and it was really emotional and emotional driving. So we implemented a term called free association. And what that means in our family is if someone comes to us and says, a family member comes to the family office and says, I want out of these structures. I don't want to be part of the family office. I was held hostage by my grandfather for decades. I want out. We're going to work with them to the best we can to get them out of structures. If they need to move the trusts out. The trusts are a little more tricky, as you might imagine, but their personal accounts, as long as they have qualified people to oversee things, we get them out of structures. And we've found that allowing people to move, and by the way, it's a two-way door, so some people have left and some people have come back. But what we found that if you give people the decision that they can make for themselves, they're less likely to pull the trigger on it. So free association is one of the things I wanted to mention to your question is what are some of the things that the family understands that they have say over, and they have say over what they can and can't do.
I have a question. Oh, something you're going to add, Brian?
Yeah, I think that's very helpful. And you've mentioned this theme a couple of times, and I just want to highlight that. It resonates that oftentimes families make decisions that seem void of logic. That's one of the challenges because you have to understand the history, the decisions that were made decades or generations ago that are passed down in different family threads. And so knowing that there's a history behind the decisions and that they are not always subject to logic and reason because they're informed by relational nuance. And so when I'm listening, I do a lot of listening to families and just hearing what they have to say. It's over and over and over again. So it's unique in that way. These are not always structures that are informed exclusively by logic and reason. They make decisions based on factors that go back generations that may not be evident to someone that hasn't lived it. So that nuance is really unique, and it creates difficult, it can be challenging to folks that are coming to work with you guys.
Yeah, I would say one more thing, maybe for a little bit of humor, like you just said. They always say that the fight about money is never about the money. Like, if you have two siblings, it's who got the bigger piece of cake at the birthday, or who got the bigger toy at Christmas. People carry that stuff. It's amazing to me. Even if I look through my family, the family arguments that date back generations and have no rhyme or reason. There's no logic behind why you would make this decision based on all that emotion. But people are emotional creatures, and that's how they make decisions.
A tool that I often hear families say they use to help navigate some of the dysfunction is philanthropy. And I'm like, that's just a different sandbox to fight over. It's not people don't automatically suspend all their angst and frustration with a sibling or cousin because we're talking about how to give money away. We want to do something noble and just and fun and it's exciting. I hear it all the time. We're just going to put them on a board in the foundation or a DAF or something, and they're all going to figure it out. I'm like, no. That's just another place that they're going to litigate their frustrations against one another. So it's you can't isolate it to, well, if it's in governance or investing or use of a family asset or something, but in philanthropy, it's all going to be fine. No. This governance and decision-making issue, I feel like, is independent of what sandbox we're talking about.
We've got 6 minutes left, so if you have any questions, we should be able, I think, to see those somewhere, somehow, on the screen down there, or people can shout. In the meantime, we've got one there.
It's a really good question, and so this is why I believe that part of the family left at that time. So the one family. So our structure was, we called it the major trustees, and the 4 trustees from each. There were 4 trustees for each branch of the family that managed the trust wealth, and they were really the ones that made the decisions. Right? If you want something done, call the trustees, and they were the ones that got together. At least this is a little bit of information that was told. The trustees got together and decided they didn't like the actions of the family member who was the acting CEO, and they fired him. It was never, ever discussed in the family. So to this day, it was never openly discussed why this family split really happened.
So you don't know.
I don't know.
Here today, exactly.
I don't know. No. And I think to your very good comments earlier, that was the problem. It was a real lack of communication. And this was a different world back then, right? It was run completely differently. It was a hierarchy. Things were not the same as they were today. But that lack of communication and lack of just bringing people along. Hey, listen, we got a big family. You got to bring people. You can't just all of a sudden fire somebody who's a family member and expect everything to be okay. Now, I realize it was more nuanced than what I'm saying here, right? But you're asking me a question. I don't know the answer. And I think that was a big part of the problem.
I got a quick question related to one that Brian asked earlier, which is like about the actual logistics of the communication itself. When a lot of these families, many of these families, right, especially once you get to generation 3, 4, and certainly beyond, have hundreds of beneficiaries, upwards of 1,000. I imagine the reply alls could just be insane. So I like it, how do you act, like what's like the actual the process for communicating anything with that many people, especially different committees, et cetera?
I want to add to that, and for Andrew to answer something. I heard I was talking to a family executive, a non-family member executive last week, and he shared this theory or his worldview, his perspective that sometimes entities, particularly the number of entities, can be weaponized. That it's the structure can really dilute the communication and governance. There's so many structures, so many entities, that gets very confusing and overwhelming, and just understanding how it all works is very hard. And when you said y'all still have, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's exactly right. You can, over generation, not necessarily intentionally, but you can end up with a lot of structures, and everything is so diluted, and so it's the weaponization, it's probably too strong of a word, but of structures, entity, the rise of the entities,
Yeah. It's interesting. I like the word weaponized, but I would say the unintended consequences of complexity. And just being able to say, I really, for our family, and when you get so many, hundreds of people in the family, and I think this is true, I've seen this through many other families that I know that are, and there's not many other families, by the way, that have 1,000 people in the family, but there are that have 100, 200, 300. I know a lot of them. And I will tell you that the more they tried to hold people together, the worse it got. And to your point, it was, no one hits reply all to it. And I don't know 3/4 of my cousins. I've never met them. I don't know them. I see them on the family tree. That's the truth of how families evolve when they're the size of ours. And I think people have to be honest about that. That's what I think. And I think being able to prune the family tree in a respectful way with people that want to stay and people that want to go, and how you articulate that, you're still a family member. And even though I don't know you, you're still part of this family. I think that's a different conversation than do you want to be an owner and do you really want to be kept up to speed. Most people, when you get to multiple generations and hundreds of people, have no idea what's going on.
I've been meaning, I meant to ask you this earlier. When you say family, I'd love to hear your perspective on this. Does it include spouses? Yeah. Like, where do spouses come in? And is there a family policy, doctrine, this is the way we do things, that there's a time or an age, or how do you navigate blood family versus spouse?
Sure. That's a great question. And looking at the clock here, I'll make this relatively quickly in case there's other questions. But we have always included everybody in our family. So if you're a married in, if you're adopted, if you're fill in the blank, you are part of the family. There are some regulations around that. If you're to be an owner of the family business, you have to be bloodline. But as far as being included, as if you want to be a director, if you want to be a trustee, if you want to be an employee, if you want, you're on the family council, you've always been included. In fact, the gentleman I mentioned before that was one of our most successful family leaders was a married in, and that was in the 1950s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. So I always think, listen, if you're going to exclude spouses and married-ins, you're excluding half your human capital.
That's impressive from back in the day.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah,
that's unusual.
It's been good.
Well, we've got one quick question, perhaps one more.
Can you repeat that? I couldn't.
Yeah, the question was vendors and service providers, a concentrated group, right, of decision makers for many beneficiaries. There are a lot of people eager for their attention. Where do they stub their toe?
Vendors is the question that vendors that want to interact with a family office? Yeah, I think for a lot of family offices, I think if I'm hearing your question right, that vendors that want to engage with family offices such as ours, how can they better align themselves to have a relationship? And I think therein lies one of the inherent issues. And I say this with all the respect in the world for vendors, but I think a lot of vendors show up like it's a transaction. And I think a lot of family offices, specifically ours, it's a relationship building timeline. And we like to know people, and we're not opportunistic. And if you need a check next week, the answer is going to be no. And do you need something today versus do you need something next week, or excuse me, next year? even, and get on the radar and figure out that timeline. But if it's a transaction you're looking for, there's some family offices that like to transact. When it comes to investments, there are too. But we're a very institutionally processed family office, as you might imagine, in 102 years. It's very different than having a G1 top-down check writer from a trust from a holding company, versus a family office like ours. Happy to talk to you more about that. But some of the things I've talked about this before to people. But it's a great question.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Maybe a brief round of applause for these guys.
Let's hear it for
Thank you.
for Brian, Michael,
Thank
and
you.
Andrew.